What is an example of pure evil? This Ohio man who raped his girlfriend's 6-month-old baby to death and then tried to get out of the death penalty because he wasn't trying to kill the 6-month-old baby, just raped her. Link. Evil incarnate. I'm a student in social anthropology, and one of my teachers studies sexual violence on men in war times, in particular during the breakup of Yugoslavia. Here is one small example of the kind of shit she saw. A young boy like 12 or 13 was at home with his 2 parents when a bunch of armed soldiers broke in. They threatened the mother with a gun and made a proposition to the kid. Sodomize your father and we will let your parents live. To save his mom and dad, the young boy complied. But when he had finished raping his own father, the soldiers killed both of his parents, gave him a bunch of drugs, a gun, and made him a child soldier fighting for their side. Anyone who abuses kids, animals, or the elderly, I hope there is a special place in Hades for them. Men who commit honor killings, special place in hell for these people. The toy box killer, truly the sickest, most horrifyingly disgusting example of humanity. The monologue, which you can find through a Google search, that he would play for his new victims is probably the scariest thing on earth. Gertrude Banaszewski, who tortured a teenager that she was meant to be looking after for 3 months before killing her. Joseph Fritzl, based in Amsterdam, Austria, held his daughter captive for 24 years. During this time he assaulted her, sexually abused and raped her numerous times during her imprisonment inside a concealed area in the cellar of the family home. The abuse resulted in 7 children. 3 remained in captivity with their mother. 1 died shortly after birth and the other 3 raised by him and his wife Rosemary. Lawrence Singleton. What he did to 15-year-old Mary Vincent is one of the most ducked up things I've ever heard. He picked her up as she was hitchhiking. When he pulled over to pee, she got out of the van to tie her shoelaces. He whacked her over the head with a shovel, put her into the back of the van, raped her all night, then cut off both of her arms and threw her off a cliff 30-feet drop and drove off. Despite this, she survived. 15-year-old Mary Vincent managed to climb back up the cliff and started walking. Eventually a couple on their honeymoon drove past her and rescued her. This isn't even the tip of the iceberg with Larry Singleton. The podcast My Favorite Murder did a brilliant episode on him. He was a cruel bastard, and I'm happy he died of brain cancer. Wait, how do you climb up a cliff if you have no arms? She packed mud in her stumps to stop the bleeding. When she finally made it to the road, and a car passed, after she walked miles they sped away. Finally a couple on their honeymoon saw her, and immediately rushed her to get help, and saved her life. Mary Vincent is one badass woman. John Venables and Robert Thompson. When they were 10, they abducted 2-year-old James Bulger from a shopping center, took him to some railway tracks, tortured and abused him for hours, then left his body to get cut in half by an oncoming train. Edit. Thank you kind redditors for the awards. It's a sad topic, but important to make young children aware of the dangers they can face, even in other children. This was my comment, but my brain had blocked out that poor boy's name. The murder of Junko Furuta. Sick pieces of shit. They're still roaming free to this day. Search at your own risk. It's absolutely horrific. Ogura's mother allegedly vandalized Furuta's grave, stating that she had ruined her son's life. I can't get over the fact that I read this. Ogura raped and tortured that girl for over a month until she died. Oscar de la Hoya. A Nazi so evil even the Nazis thought he went too far. Look up some of the atrocities he committed during WWII, specifically the Warsaw Uprising. Basically a sadist alcoholic pedo unleashed in a war without rules. Edit. Just one excerpt from Wikipedia. In the summer of 1944, de la Hoya led his butchers, rapists and looters into action against the Warsaw Uprising, and quickly committed unspeakable crimes. In Warsaw, de la Hoya participated in the Walla massacre, together with police units rounding up and shooting some 40,000 civilians, most of them in just 2 days. In the same Walla district, de la Hoya burned 3 hospitals with patients inside, while the nurses were whipped, gang raped and finally hanged naked, together with the doctors to the accompaniment of the popular song in M. Chenstetin Hof Horse. Some guy in the 80s who worked in a lab injected his infant son with HIV infected blood so his son would die a horrible death and he wouldn't have to pay child support. Edit 1992, not 80s. People who torture animals to make videos and people who get off on that. Crystal Scott 19 of Kokomo was the bitch who was arrested in 2020 for distributing animal crushing videos. Link. What's really bad is the fake animal rescue videos, where they hurt the animal and trap it under some rocks, and then they turn the camera on and act like they just found the animal, and are rescuing it. Link. I posted this on another Reddit thread a few weeks ago. Read at your own risk. But some of the more shocking element, this poor 8-year-old boy was tortured to death by his parents' mom's stepdad, because they believed he was gay. He was often locked in a box at the foot of their bed for days at a time. They starved him, beat him, broke his bones, burned him with cigarettes, forced him to urinate defect on himself by depriving access to a toilet, and then punished him for it, forced him to sit in freezing cold baths to reduce visible bruises, lied to social workers, and said he was visiting family when he was actually bound, gagged, locked in the box in their bedroom. At his autopsy, the ME found BBs from a BB gun lodged in his testicle and face. They also found cat litter in his stomach, and it was later revealed by a sibling that Gabriel was responsible for cleaning the litter boxes for the mom's 7 cats. If the parents found feces in the boxes after he was supposed to have cleaned them, he was made to eat it. They made him eat spoiled food, and if he threw up they forced him to eat his own vomit. The worst part is, he only lived with them for 8 months. He lived the first 7 years of his life with the mom's uncle and his partner in Mexico. Mom took him back because 2 gay men are not appropriate caregivers for a young boy, not my words, was in the Netflix doc, and because they wanted to receive welfare benefits for him. So this poor kid who was happy and raised with love for 7 years gets suddenly yanked away from the only home he's ever known and then tortured to death. This is pure ducking evil. I hope the stepdaddy got initiated into the Rosebud Club his first 15 minutes in prison. Edit for so many people asking. Geez, I didn't realize this angry comment would bring so much attention. NSFW Rosebud definition. Link. That Sylvia Lycan story. I honestly felt like less of a human after reading it. I never thought a Wikipedia article could make me cry so damn hard, but it was like every line just kept getting worse. Link. When I read that wiki article for the first time, I kept thinking, oh my god, that's just horrible. And then I scrolled further and saw the chapter called Escalation. The people who pressured a 14-year-old Japanese teen to kill herself on stream. Torturing helpless animals, children, and or the elderly. There is a special place in hell for these kinds of people. Murder of Kellyanne Bates. I won't go into the details as it is very gruesome, but know that some consider her to be the most tortured victim. Her boyfriend tortured her over a period of 4+ weeks. Link. Warning, not for the faint of heart. Nanjing Massacre. The rape of Nanjing. One of the witnesses, a reverend, estimated that there were 1,000 rapes every night. Tens of thousands of people were murdered. Absolutely horrible. You can read more about it here, link, but yeah, it's bad. The worst part is that it wasn't just regular raping. They would literally force sons to rape their mothers, as well as fathers to their daughters. Child sex trafficking. It literally ruins these innocent children's lives before they can do anything about it. Disgusting. I want to say money makes people do abominable things, but it's somehow more than that. If you really wanted money, surely there are ways you can get it, even illegally. That is much less evil than this. Chris Watts, Colorado father who strangled his 34-year-old pregnant wife, then killed his 3 and 4-year-old daughters and dumped their bodies in oil tanks. He did this to get rid of obstacles that prevented him from being with his lover. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes and comments. I had no idea there was a Netflix documentary and YouTube videos on this case. I don't think I have the stomach to watch those. I just remember watching the news coverage at the time and feeling sick to my stomach for those poor little girls and their pregnant mother. There's a lot of evil in the world, but it's one of the ones I can't forget. Apparently, lots of women have been sending him love letters to the prison because of how hot he is after he went viral by the Netflix documentary. They are sick in the head too. This is unfortunately common and nothing new. Even Bundy had women pining for him. It's insane. Child molestation and severe physical torture used solely for emotional pleasure. Anyone who kills pizza delivery drivers. So not only are you a scumbag for killing someone, you're literally killing a minimum wage worker who delivers happiness and doesn't have more than 50 on themselves at any given time. You deserve to be crammed into the cargo hold of a rocket going to the Sunday. It's right up there with killing children and other defenseless people. A special circle of hell exists just for them. The medical experiments done in concentration camps during WWII. Taking advantage of the innocent and weak, i.e. children and animals. Skinning animals alive. People who eat meat and don't eat meat. I'm pretty sure we can all agree that this right here is ducked up. Lying in bed for 20 years. Pretending you're too ill to get a job. Making your daughter work 3 jobs to keep you in tobacco and cabbage water. Then jumping out of bed like Fred Astaire when your grandson wins a factory visit. People who knowingly spread STDs and other viruses. That one story of those Yakuza boys torturing that one girl, Junko, something. I'll have to look it up later, but the details are honestly gut-wrenching. Edit: the name is Junko Furuta. Meant no disrespect by not remembering. Just genuinely forgot with all the other stories I've read. Just goes to show you how much ducked up shit is really out there. If I remember the story you're talking about, I don't think they were actually Yakuza. One of them just claimed to be. But yes, they tortured, raped, and eventually murdered a 17-year-old girl, and one of the guy's parents were aware of it. They were actually keeping her hostage in the house. This happened for weeks, months, but no one stepped in. Truly ducking gruesome. And the mom of one of those assholes recently vandalized her grave for ruining her son's life. Ducking what? Edit: and the real ducked up part. This was after her son was released from a 7-year stint of nearly beating a man to death, where he allegedly said, "I've killed before and know how to get away with it." I hope she escorts them to hell and haunts them until then. Listening to Salad Days Panzermensch while you kill your old friends and classmates with an R-15. Pastor Mac Charles Andrews Jr. of Alabama, who raped a 9-year-old girl on top of her father's grave among other kids in front of his own children, whom he taught to believe that was normal, and he threatened his child victims with promises that he would sick demons on them. He was sentenced to 15 years of prison and released after 5. What is an example of pure evil? A society which allows this. When I was 19 and depressed, I lived with a group of guys I considered my little weirdo family. One of the guys, the one I trusted the least and wasn't sure what exactly was off, tortured my kitten and then lied about it. I moved out the next day. A friend told me the truth about what he had done to my cat. I still don't know why she didn't take the cat and ducking leave or call me to come home. What a pussy. She was the same guy plus another mutual friend murdered a homeless man in our city the following week. Like, brutally murdered. The SWAT team busted in the apartment I had just left. Luckily I missed out on the drama rather than my cat being put down. Really taught me about my lack of judgment. I had also just purchased what I thought was a sweet ass Halloween time shower curtain, complete with blood splatter and handprints, before I realized I was living with literal American psychos. Super strange feeling. Using the source of drinking water of a whole town for some country club in the midst of the biggest drought ever. The scary amount of women who've gone in to have IVF or use a sperm donor and the doctor uses their own sample instead of the chosen provided one. I remember seeing an article about a doctor who had like 50 plus kids from doing this, which, considering how expensive IVF and fertility treatments are, I really think punishment for that kind of thing should be incredibly heavy-handed. Jeffrey Dahmer. He got 14 life sentences if I recall. In prison he was brutally murdered with dumbbells. So naturally, he now has 13 left to go. I'll see myself out. Rather than an example, I've always thought that evil was knowing something was very wrong, but doing it anyway. Richard Ramirez. As a 12-year-old, Richard, or Richie, as he was known to his family, was strongly influenced by his older cousin, Miguel Mike Ramirez. 7, a decorated Green Beret combat veteran who himself had already become a serial killer and a rapist in Vietnam, who often boasted of his brutal war crimes during the Vietnam War, and shared Polaroid photos of his victims both during and after his crimes with his younger cousin Richard, including Vietnamese women he had raped, murdered, and dismembered. Many of the women and girls in the photos are shown to have been bound to trees with rope before Mike raped them, and afterwards having been killed by him decapitating them with a machete. In some of the photos, Mike posed with the severed heads of women he had sexually assaulted and murdered. Richard would later state, while incarcerated, that he was never shocked or repulsed by these images and stories of his cousin's wartime atrocities in Vietnam, but that they fascinated him. Richard, who had begun smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol at the age of 10, bonded with Mike through smoking joints and drinking beers, while Richard listened to his elder cousin's gruesome war stories. Mike taught his young cousin some of his military skills, such as killing with stealth. Around this time, Ramirez began to seek escape from his father's violent temper by sleeping in a local cemetery. Richard was present on May 4th, 1973, when his cousin Mike fatally shot his wife, Jessie, in the face with a handgun during a domestic argument. Like the graphic photos and stories of his cousin's war crimes in Vietnam, Richard Ramirez would later similarly remark while in prison that seeing this event unfold wasn't traumatic for him in any traditional sense, but rather, witnessing a violent death for the first time had deeply fascinated him. After the shooting, Richard became sullen and withdrawn from his family and peers. Later that year, Richard moved in with his older sister, Ruth, and her husband, Roberto, an obsessive peeping Tom who took Richie along on his nocturnal exploits. Ramirez also began using LSD and cultivated an interest in Satanism. Mike was found not guilty of Jess's murder by reason of insanity, largely thought to be due to his presumed severe wartime PTSD from his time serving in Vietnam, and was released in 1977. After 4 years of incarceration at the Texas State Mental Hospital, his influence over Ramirez continued, and it's known that Mike resumed occasionally bonding with Richard over a shared use of drugs and alcohol, and that he sometimes accompanied Richard and Roberto on their nighttime voyeuristic walks, where they would spy on women in the nearby areas without their knowledge through windows. I can't say holy duck enough times. Holy duck.